Welcome to the CocoKids Playbook, a podcast by CocoKids. I'm John Jones, Executive Director of CocoKids. All right, welcome to I'm going to say our third episode, but it all depends on what order you listen to these things in. We are joined again today with Margaret Wiegert Jacobs of CocoKids. I'm John Jones. I'm the Executive Director of CocoKids, and the purpose of this podcast is to get you more informed and make children a higher priority in your life. So welcome, Margaret.
It's a pleasure to be here, John. Thank you.
All right. So last time we talked a lot about the cost of childcare. So today let's talk about something a little bit different. A lot of, there's differing of opinions on how you utilize childcare, what's best for you in terms of childcare. And then there's people who believe in having their child stay home. So which is better, enrolling your child into a program or having them stay home with mom or dad?
You know, I could talk out of both sides of my mouth here on this one.
Hmm.
Okay, there's good and bad there's good and better for both sides.
Right. Okay.
It's all a personal choice.
Uh-huh.
And the whole point of everything for me is that you have a choice. Some people don't have a choice. The ones that do have a choice, sometimes it's even harder for them because they have to deal with guilt in either direction. How many working mothers have you felt, parents have you met that don't feel guilt one way or the other, no matter what they choose?
Okay. So talk
It's
about
deeply ingrained.
let's explore those who don't have a choice. What circumstances are parents, really forced to look for childcare? What would those be?
Usually it's financial is the biggest one. They financially feel that they don't have a choice and they must put their child into childcare. Of course, you know that I believe those first 5 years are so important. So I want
Right.
them to find the best childcare they can. And then maybe it'll relieve some of the guilt of putting your child into childcare. You have someone that is helping you raise your family, helping you raise your children. That's a lovely idea.
Okay. So it sounds like you're talking about people who financially, in order to make ends meet, they have to work.
Hmm.
And then there's a group of people who don't have those family resources. They don't have relatives around town that can pick up the slack, so they have to put their child in childcare. What about the people who want to use childcare?
They want to use childcare. Usually it's the woman, it falls on the woman's shoulders, or at least one of the caregivers, one of the parents, to choose childcare because maybe they want their career to keep going. And I don't like to think that that's a bad thing or detrimental to the child because they can pick good childcare. If you pick good childcare, there's many benefits. We can go into all those benefits, but there's benefits for the child, there's benefits for the parents to be in childcare. We can go on
Okay,
and
all
talk
right.
about the specifics. For the woman, it's you stay in your career field and hopefully progress up the salary scale and have extenuating ramifications of what kind of social security you're going to get at the end of your career. It's going to be at a higher level if you stayed in the field. If you stopped working for 15 years, it's going to affect is something as simple as your social security, and then even deeper where you are in your career ladder will be affected when you take a 15-year hiatus.
I remember, what was it, a year ago, we went back to DC. We were in Washington, DC for the Child Care Aware Conference.
Yes.
And one of the speakers talked about the mommy tax. And this was, I think they had noticed that when a woman gives birth, her salary tends to go down, but for the man, it goes up. So there was
Hmm.
some discrepancies between, if for those who stayed in the workforce, did they make more after having kids? And for women, it didn't pay off, but somehow for men, it did. Do you have any thoughts on that or why that would occur?
Right, it's where you are in your career ladder, right? And all those things I just talked about.
So,
So
so if there's a disruption, it kind of
yeah, the
prevents you from
disruption
moving
may
along.
put you back for good.
Right. Okay.
Not that you can't still make advancements in your career, but it does make a difference.
Okay. All right, so now let's go over to the other side. So there's people who need childcare because it's absolute necessity. They don't really have a choice. There's people who choose childcare because they do want to continue working and on their career path. What about those who don't choose to continue on that route, who don't choose childcare and want to keep their kids at home?
They really believe that they could give a more loving relationship. They had children because they want to be with them. They think that they don't want to leave their child to somebody else to raise. Although the more children in a child's life, no, the more adults in a child's life is a wonderful gift to them. So I don't think there could ever be too many adults when you have stability. You have the stability of the parents. But
And,
that being said,
and then you had mentioned before there's a economic reasons where sometimes people don't have that choice, but they do stay home because they may have two or three kids, and the cost of that care exceeds their salary.
right, they may have a whole different decision. The first child, okay. The second child, I don't have any choice. The third child, I can't even begin to afford childcare anymore. So maybe they had a choice on the first one, but they don't on the third one. Um, that makes a difference too. So I I just have to go with the personal preference of what's right for you and your family. There could be some people that love being at home. They can be so happy doing activities with the children at home. And there's other people, no matter how much they love their children, they can get bored being at home.
All right.
Many mothers don't like to admit that, but yes, it's tough being at home with children all day. So by going to work, you get the pleasure and the success of doing something well or even doing something poorly. You get you achieve something at the end of the day.
Uh-huh.
You either brought home a paycheck or you accomplished something. And at home, it continues. There's still more dirty clothes. There's still more clothes to clean up and toys to clean up. So that could be difficult. Maybe you don't get that sense of maybe your reward comes when they're 20 years old and they're
Right, right.
launching into their career. That's a long time to wait for
Uh,
success.
uh-huh.
So, I just mostly want them to have a choice and to think about what their child does. Some children need other children around.
Okay.
They need more stimulation. But some parents that are at home are very good about finding groups for their kids to play with during the week, during
Yeah,
when they'd be
it's
at
the
school.
what do they call
The
the
different
play
play
dates?
groups, yeah, yes.
Yeah.
And they find other parents that are home and they get together with them. I think the social part is very important, whether it's at home or in school, that social part. The other part about being at a center is that they're exposed to germs. They're exposed to other ideas. Um,
Wait, you're making a case
I
that
know I could
germs are good? So-
yes, they to be exposed to it, early in life
yeah, well,
and
there's
build
some
up your
truth to that.
resistance.
Yeah,
I
there's
know
truth to
some people
that.
don't like that, yeah.
Most of the time when you see a first year teacher, they're sick all the time
Mhm.
because kids have germs. And that's the great thing about childcare is your kid gets exposed to those germs. You remember the time when chickenpox was a
Mhm.
huge thing and people
And
would
you
take
send
their
your child somewhere to
yeah,
get
get exposed so
Oh,
they could
no
get it
worries.
over with.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, so maybe we should put that down. Childcare is good for the immune system, you know.
It very well could be.
Mm,
So there's lots of benefits. I of course, being in the field, read lots of benefits to being in childcare. Things like they learn to be part of a group. They learn to focus. They learn social skills. They learn, besides their colors and their numbers, those kinds of things that mom can teach at home too. Dad can be teaching all the social skills too. But they're picking that up in preschool, maybe easier unless the family at home makes a concerted effort if the child's at home to get them out with other people. Particularly during the COVID, when people were very isolated, there's studies coming out now about these children that were raised in isolation and lack some social skills or lack some awareness of people around them. lack some, they're used to the world revolving around them at home, as opposed to, you might sometimes have to wait 5 or 10 minutes to get your turn when you're at school or with other people.
That's a good point. So it increases their social independence. It helps their educational process. I think for a lot of for with young kids, especially 0 through 5, is that socialization piece that's really important. And
Hmm.
I know that's where a lot of kids start to pick up language because they're hearing other kids use
Hmm.
words and they
That's a
learn
good
that
point.
way. They don't always, it's hard to learn how to speak when nobody speaks the language to you. So those things all good factors. In your own life, do you know of people who have just chosen to be, and I'm not saying this that there's anything wrong with it. My own daughter has 3 kids and she stays home with her kids. She even announced it before she had her first kid that her intent was to stay home and raise her kids with, and I think her husband was a little bit surprised, but that's what she's doing. And I said, that's her choice and she could do that. I did not take that route. I put my kids right into childcare, but unfortunately we ended up with the group that you had mentioned. By the time we had our second child, we couldn't afford childcare. It was actually their mother's entire paycheck went to pay for childcare, and we decided, why are we paying someone, to watch the kids? And that whole salary was going to that. So keeping that in mind, you know, the reverse of that is learning at home does have a certain benefit to that. But it sounds like you're saying it has to have additional supports in terms of play dates
Hmm.
and social opportunities.
Right. So many of the things that are done at school that they learn from can also be done at home, but it takes much more effort. And some parents are great at that. Some parents are great at making Play Doh at home and finding someone for their child at the appropriate age to play with. And some are not. We all know just because parents of generations past were home with their kids doesn't mean their kids came out great.
Right.
Just being there in the same building does not mean those children came out feeling loved and their brain interested in learning. There's so much more to engaging their brain, and let's not waste those years of watching TV. Being home with a parent that you're just watching a screen doesn't doesn't make it a more productive childhood than being at school, or vice versa. It depends on what you're doing. I really feel parents get guilt no matter which one they choose.
Yeah, well, especially with the number of screens available to them, because if your kid's not watching TV, they're probably on an iPad or they're probably on your phone. Um, and and since we have less control over what's on the internet, it seems kind of a scary world that unless you're paying 100% of your attention to your child at all times, that you could successfully navigate that. Uh, so just for you personally, what did you choose for your kids as you were raising them? Did you go
So
childcare or did you go
the
homeschool or
first one went to childcare.
okay?
By the time I got to the second one, I said, "Well, this is crazy."
Uh-huh.
And by the time had the third one, then I was definitely home for a while. But I found other ways to stimulate the brain. You know,
Uh-huh.
I think I've told you I started teaching community college at night to to stimulate the brain, to show my children that you could go out and do something too. So it's just all personal. Not everybody has a job that they can do part-time. I think studies show that women, that when they first have a child, they'd like to work part-time. They don't necessarily want to be home full time, and they don't want their child in care full time. So if you could have the best of all worlds, maybe you're a mom that uh, works part time, but not everybody has a career a job that they can do that with, or of course
Yeah.
can live off the pay.
And I think in our current world, most people are working more than 40 hours and multiple jobs and swing shifts and
Hmm.
gig jobs. And so it's not as easy as, oh, from 9 to 5, I will be home with my kid or I will have my child in
Hmm.
childcare. They got to find other ways to make ends meet. So it's almost like the economic piece makes kind of dictates our reality here. You know, if you make enough money that you could stay home, that's great. If you don't, you got to figure out how to piece together this ideal environment for your child.
Yeah, some might think that if you don't have to decide, like, I don't have a choice, I have to go back to work so I don't have to feel guilty. Um, Sometimes having the choice is even more difficult.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't even think it's as simple as feeling it's not as much as just about feeling guilty. It's if the lights are going to stay on, I have to go back to work. You know, if we're going to have a roof over our head, I have to go back to work. If you're going to
Mhm.
eat, we have to go back to work.
Mhm.
Those, you know, just being able to cover your child's basic needs uh, are probably the biggest driver for the need for childcare. But you know, on the other end, for those who can afford it or can make ends meet or can live within their means, staying at home has its benefits too. Yeah.
It does. That some people have thought it, like your daughter, have thought it carefully. This is what I want in life. It doesn't mean that in 2 years your daughter's going to say, she may then say, you know what, now I'm ready. These children are going to school, half day, full day. I'm ready to go back to other things that I want to do. And so we want the option. Isn't that what women fought for? Is to have the option. Don't have to go back to work. I don't have to stay home. It's the option for your individual circumstances.
Yeah. And
And I
I
have
think,
to go back to the child too.
uh-huh,
Where will the child be happiest?
right. So it's almost, so what we want to preserve is everybody's individual ability to make a choice. It's not one size fits all.
Hmm.
People need different qualities. You know, my confession, I was never in childcare or at home. Actually, I was at home, but my parents, you know, and I'm so much older, so they were at a time where they couldn't afford childcare, but my mother worked the overnight shift at the hospital, and my dad worked during the day. So there was always a parent in our household. The problem is yeah, since my mother worked the overnight shift, she was asleep most of the day, and that's when I got in the most trouble. You know, there was really nobody watching me, and at the same time, when my father was home, he was sleeping. So someone was there, but they were asleep half the time, and that enrichment process didn't necessarily happen. But I had older brothers who taught me everything I knew.
Hmm.
You know,
Which could be good or bad.
yeah. Well, yeah, I learned a lot of good swear words. How about that? All right. Okay. So to kind of sum up, you the having the ability to put your kid in childcare does have its benefits because it has a social emotional component. You has an educational component, and so a child could be very well off. And also, staying at home could benefit because they're building stronger relationships, parent-child relationships. Um, you know, the the parent relation or the parent has the ability to educate their child and also bring in other supports in order to
Hmm.
get the same benefits as childcare.
Hmm.
But it's also sounded like what you're stressing is that what's more important above all that is we all have that choice or that option to make that we could do what's best for our own families versus having to do something.
That's my desire to have options for parents. And I understand some parents just do not have that option. So for them, the ones that have to go back to work, I want to make sure they have some good options of where they take their child.
Okay. All right.
It's not supposed to be a punishment for a child. It's supposed to still be a wonderful childhood, no matter which one of those places they're
And even if it's not, you just tell them it is, right?
at.
You know, you love this place. Oh, I do. Okay. Any last thoughts before we close out? Like,
I just want parents to have a choice. I want parents to think about it intentionally, to think about am I doing the best for my child, whether it's home or in a program. And I hope they if we as a society would support them so they get to make that choice, wouldn't that be wonderful?
yeah, that would be wonderful. And I think we also need to reassure them that it's their choice and they can make the right choice. Everybody's afraid of making the wrong choice when it comes to their kids, and somehow they're going to mess them up. But no, I think more parents are better at it than they realize.
I
As
don't
long
think parents used to worry as much as they do now.
my
Now
parents
they
did not.
worry. I know our parents like I'm keeping them alive. They're fine. You know. Now these young parents are so smart and savvy. They read so much.
Mm.
They get so much bombarded at them um, that they are trying so hard to make. They have more pressure on them, I think, than our parents did.
Yeah, yeah, that's a good point. All right, so we're here to make sure they don't feel that pressure. Okay.
Yes,
All
thank
right.
you.
All right. Well, thank you for coming in today. This was a good topic, and I'm sure I'll have you in again for another topic in the future. So once again, this is us going to close out this session of the podcast, and I look forward to talking to you again soon.
Thank you, John.
All right. Bye. This podcast was brought to you by CocoKids. Thank you to Letty Cuizan, executive producer, and Faith Donathan, line producer.